This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 148, entitled The MGTOW/Masculist Combat Against Women's Ingrained/Evolved Expectations that Men Should Pay for Them to Have Babies. Description. This flyer lashes out at women's ingrained, evolved attitude that men are put on this earth to pay for women to have babies. Masculists put enormous moral pressure on women to be FIPs, that's FIP, financially independent persons, and pull their own financial weight and not see men as cash machines to pay for them to raise kids. Now the flyer itself. The MGTOW/Masculist combat against women's ingrained/evolved expectations that men should pay for them to have babies. Combating the attitude that women have that men are put on this earth to pay women to have babies is so deeply ingrained, that probably even evolved, that it will take considerable effort on the part of the MGTOW/Masculists to overcome it. In the past, before the fluffy feminists took over the divorce courts and made them toxic to males, a man who married and had kids with a woman had the expectation that he would benefit from having those kids, that is, he would keep them and watch them grow up. They have half his DNA, so he has a real bond with them. But then along came the fluffy feminists in all their hypocrisy and stupid short-term thinking, who wanted to be able to get out of bad marriages and to keep having men pay for them to have kids. They lobbied the gender politicians who gave them what they wanted, so they got to keep their cake and to eat it too. Men got financially massacred. Roughly 1 married man in 4 in the US has his life destroyed by losing his kids, losing his house, paying child support and alimony to his fluffy ex-wife. This has made divorce and hence marriage so toxic for men that young men in their millions in the West and Japan are refusing the traditional male role of being a man-slave to a woman and have gone MGTOW/Masculist, or in Japan, herbivore, refusing to marry, refusing to have kids, and spending their money not on a woman and kids, but on himself. 70% of young men under 35 in the US and Japan are now doing this. Women are now being confronted with the longer-term effects of their selfish short-term thinking. In the short term, they benefited from continuing to parasite off men's money after the divorce, the way they had before the divorce. What they did not anticipate was the massive male backlash against being financially massacred in the divorce courts. Young men look at what happened to their fathers, resolve that they will never allow the same to happen to them, and so decide to go MGTOW/Masculist. That is, they refuse to marry and refuse to have kids. The Masculists do more than what the MGTOWs do, that is, passively walk away from the marriage market and from paternity. Masculists fight. Masculists hit back at fluffies and fluffy feminists and push the media, the schools, the colleges, the gender politicians and society in general that the gender laws have to be made men fair, that men's status needs to be restored, or the Masculists and MGTOWs will wipe out whole populations until they get what they demand. Women are punished by MGTOW/Masculists by simply refusing to marry them and refusing to give them babies. This is a very effective strategy to force women to stop looking at men as cash machines. Speaking as a male myself, I feel very angry when some bloody female looks at me only as an exploitable resource and not at my other qualities, such as my intelligence, my personality, my hobbies, my interests, etc. I'm not interested in a woman who looks at me as though I'm a bank account for her. I see such women as the enemy, as fluffies, as immoral, parasitic, man-slaving vermin, to be wiped out by avoiding having anything to do with them, forcing them to rot on the shelf to extinction, until all women are educated that they are to pull their financial weight by becoming FIPs, financially independent persons, who bother to get a career-competent education that will allow them to become FIPs as adults and not want to parasite on some manslave when she's in her 30s and she wants to have babies and not have to raise them and have a well-paid career at the same time. Masculists put enormous moral pressure on fluffies to become FIPs, especially at the root at the problem, which starts at high school, where more than 80% of young women decide at 16 years of age to study the soft option, that is, not the tough option of math and the sciences, which means that they'll be excluded from studying career competent STEM, science, tech, engineering and math majors and the professions at college. So we'll end up with a fluffy crap diploma that will make them rather poor, because the economy does not pay fluffy crappers very well. These fluffy crappers will then look around for a manslave in their 30s so that he pays for the middle class house she wants to raise her kids in. Fluffy crappers in their teens are deciding to be immoral, parasitic manslavers at an early age, and over 80% of them. This is a moral outrage that the Masculists are very angry about and berate these young fluffy crappers for their decisions to become potential manslavers. Masculists differ from MGTOWs, who do not harangue females. MGTOWs just walk away. Masculists attack fluffies, fluffy crappers, fluffy feminists for being manslavers. Masculists say to them that manslavery is slavery, slavery is a war issue, and that the Masculists are at war against the fluffies, aiming as their main political goal to wipe them out. The angrier and more bitter these women become at not finding a manslave to pay for them, given their traditional expectations of men as cash machines, the more they are attacked by the Masculists, who are outraged by the massive gender injustice committed against men in the divorce courts, the lack of a paternity rejection right, etc. The fact that women have a mara but men don't have a para screams of gender injustice, as well as the fact that men are seen by the law merely as cash machines for women. MGTOW/Masculists are so pissed off with this attitude of women and the gender politicians that they will truly wipe out whole populations unless society and the gender politicians men-fair the gender laws and women learn to expect to be FIPs on moral grounds. Those women who are stupid enough to continue to expect that they can be fluffies and find some manslave to sexploit will lead a miserable half-life, rotting on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, poor if they're fluffies, and increasingly shunned by society, which is becoming increasingly informed about men's gender plight every day. Masculists need to get into the high schools where most of the initial fluffy damage is done, and put enormous moral pressure on these young fluffies who choose to become fluffy crappers, later expecting to parasite off some manslave. They need to be told that the supply of manslaves is drying up. The male high schoolers need to be taught not to marry nor to have kids. The male high schoolers need to be taught not to marry, not to have kids, because with the massive gender injustices against men in today's gynocentric society, only fools marry. These young men need to be taught that roughly one married man in 4 will be financially massacred in the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts. He will lose his kids, so why bother having them? In my own case, in the mid-70s, I gave up working part-time at what I enjoyed doing, tutoring math students at Cambridge University in England, to get some shit full-time computing job so my fluffy crapper ex-wife could stay at home and raise her kids. 6 years later, she goes to Australia. I return to Europe and lose my kids, and feel bitter about having lost 6 years of my life being a manslave doing crap work that I had no heart in. Stories like this need to be told to the male high schoolers. Tell them not to marry, not to have kids, because the odds are 50-50 that the marriage will fail. And of those divorces, a half or more will be toxic, because the ex-wives will have fluffy attitudes towards men, seeing men as cash machines. And she will want your cash, and she will use the law to extract it from you. So fuck them. Fuck these fluffies. Fuck the gender politicians who made these massively unjust gender laws. Men are really angry now and are fighting back. Thank God. Masculists need to help set up a men's lib group in every high school to teach the young men of the toxicity of marriage, etc. Similarly in every college and university. Masculists and MGTOWs need to get on the broadcast media and teach society. This is something I'm planning on doing later this year, making YouTube lecture videos that I hope will stimulate the journalists to invite me to speak on their shows. I was recently on RT, Russia Today, with 1 billion views, with a B. Don't believe it, it's more like a million. So if I can have a similar impact on society's level of awareness of MGTOW masculist ideas, then that could be significant. MGTOW/Masculists need to do a lot more on the publicity front. We need to get our message out to the masses, to men, to women, to parents, to teachers, to professors, to the gender politicians, to society. Men are seen as exploitable cash machines, and we are fed up with that image. We are going on strike, and we will wipe out whole populations if necessary to get the gender laws changed, and to have society value men for who, not what, we are. We are not cash machines. We have personalities and abilities, and refuse to be treated by fluffies and the law as exploitable resources for women and kids. We refuse. We are on strike. You gender politicians must listen to us and give us what we men want, or eventually you will be assassinated. As the population really starts falling, the way it is now starting to do in Japan, then enormous moral and political pressures will be placed on you to mend fair the gender laws and to systematically remove gender injustices against men across the board. Otherwise, passions against you will rise so strongly that people of both sexes will take the law into their own hands and remove you violently with bullets. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channel name, de GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers.